Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos, and today we have the patch notes of this week's beta build. This week's beta build comes with a huge tank set of changes that I already have a video on that you can click on the little card thing up in the top right if you want to go and look at. One thing that's just come out as well is a nerf to Fortified. Fortified is reducing its damage modifier from 30% to 20% to reduce the overall damage to the group to offset the fact that tanks will likely need a bit more external healing. Your feedback's greatly appreciated. We'll be keeping a close eye on dungeon and raid testing, and we'll further adjust individual abilities as needed. Good change, I think. This definitely gives me a little bit more confidence that maybe it's not going to be the absolute end of the world, the tank changes, but I'm still more negative than positive on those. But this is the type of thing that, you know, is definitely encouraging to see. Okay, so let's take a look at changes. So some of these changes were already discussed in the tank changes. It's worth noting that some of these effects will apply to DPS specs as well, for instance. So Deathstrike will also have this change in how it functions apply to if you're playing Unholy or Frost as well. It's probably not that big of a deal. It's pretty rare that you're like spamming Deathstrike as Unholy and Frost. It's not impossible. It does happen. So this is, you know, a noticeable nerf, but it's not likely to be super relevant in the way that it is for Frost or for Blood. And similarly, you know, Enfeeble and Null Magic nerfs will also touch Frost and Unholy potentially too. Okay, hero talents. Deathbringer. Reaper's Mark is now a 45-second CD, but Swift End only gives it 30 seconds, or 15 instead of 30 seconds of cooldown reduction, so I imagine these cancel out mostly. Frost, now a bunch of stuff scales with its mastery, which I think this same change was made for Unholy a few weeks ago. Probably good. Rider of the Apocalypse. Damage of all riders reduced by 15%. A bunch of other nerfs here to damage of Feast of Souls, Hungering Thirst, Trollbane's Icy Fury, and Undeath. This was one of the hero talent trees that was definitely doing big damn, so not surprised to see this getting toned down a little bit. Blood. So some of these changes were in the defensive side of things, and some of these were in the offensive side of things, and we'll read just the offensive ones because the defensive ones were already mentioned in the tank tuning change video thing. Consumption's damage occurs more quickly. Occurs less more quickly. So it occurs 30% more quickly instead of 50. And the duration is reduced to 6 seconds was 8, so consumption nerf. Rapid decomposition nerfed as well. 15% faster was 18%. Coagulopathy increases blood plague damage by 25% was 30%. And then these are all of the tank changes that were already mentioned. So a couple of other nerfs to damage things, but these also affect Leech too, so this is also some self-healing nerfs. Not substantial ones, though, mostly just some damage nerfs there. Frost, damage nerfs to Glacial Advance, Icy Death Torrent, Enduring Strength getting nerfed back down, and Shattering Blade is also getting nerfed here. So a little bit of Frost nerfs, spec that looked really good on the most recent round of beta as well. This was buffed recently, getting a little bit nerfed back down. The tuning is still kind of all over the place for a lot of specs, so it's kind of hard for me to have a really good handle on what's looking good and what's looking bad, but this is not one of the specs I'm surprised to see getting toned down a little bit. I would also be expecting Unholy to get toned down a little bit, and it does look like, yeah, Ebon Fever is getting nerfed, Bursting Sores is getting nerfed, Bursting Sores is getting double nerfed, and Super Strain is also applying a slightly weaker Blood Plague and Frost Fever as well. So some slight nerfs to Unholy as well. Yeah, both DPS DK specs were doing a lot of damage on the most recent build. DH, Live by the Glaive nerf this is a change that was aimed at Vengeance, but will also affect Havoc. Aldrachi Reaver, they are reducing the effectiveness of Incisive Blade. And Fellscarred, Demon Surge no longer increases armor or max health while your demon form is active for Havoc. And Demon Surge now causes Demon's Bite to generate 15 additional Fury, Demon Blades 5 additional Fury, while your demon form is active. Now, this is one of the least, I would say, good ways to put power into Fellscarred. Increasing Fury gen while Demon Surge is active seems like one of the least helpful ways to buff a very anemic hero talent tree. Like, Fellscarred to me is the one that looks more fun to play, but it's doing a lot less number than Aldrachi Reaver right now for Havoc. And in particular, it's like you get these empowered Immo auras and stuff, but then they don't actually seem to do anything, really, the empowered ones that you're supposed to press. So I don't know. I don't know what's going on with Fellscarred. I don't really know what they're trying to do with either of these hero talent trees for Havoc. So I would love to see if there's only time left for a few more hero talent tree like medium-sized reworks, I really hope that at least one, and preferably both, of the DH ones are still on that list. Then these were all the tank notes already mentioned in the tank video. Druid, regrowth initial healing increased, frenzied regen. So these are all changes that were in the tank ones, but notably, particularly the renewal one is going to affect all 4 Druid specs. Regrowth's initial healing increased is definitely a big deal as well. That's a large increase in Druid spot healing, Resto Druid in particular. Although this will affect, Feral Druid healing by quite a bit too. Hero talents, Keeper of the Grove. Dream Bloom healing increased. Power of Nature healing increased. Minor Cenarian Ward healing increased. So they're buffing Keeper of the Grove's healing by quite a lot, it looks like. Okay. Wildstalker is also getting buffed. So they are just buffing... Oh, no, they're nerfing Bond with Nature healing taken. And they're nerfing Harmonious Constitution, but they're buffing Regrowth baseline, so that kind of cancels. Bursting growth healing increased by 100%. Implant causes the blooms for grow to grow for 6 was 4. Vigorous Creepers increased the healing your spells do to affected targets by 20 was 6. So this looks like a moderate buff to Wildstalker, particularly for Resto, and a buff to Keeper of the Grove, particularly for Resto as well. Okay, tank changes, and then we have some Resto Druid specific changes. Swift Bend, Life Bloom, initial healing over time and Bloom, and Sen Ward also all getting some big healing. So buffing Resto Druid. A healer spec that I think definitely, it was already looking okay, already looking pretty good, but looks like I don't know. This is one of those things where, again, it's hard for me to have a good grasp of like what the tuning was. So if you told me they were buffing one of the healer specs, I'm not sure I would have guessed it would have been Resto Druid, but I'm also not confident enough to be like, oh no, that was already OP. They shouldn't have buffed it. I feel like maybe that'll be a knee-jerk response from people given the state of it on live where it's already really good, but it definitely was weaker on beta than it is on live. I just thought it was already, reasonably good, but maybe there's some buffs coming to other healer specs as well. Evoker, Disintegrate, Fire Breath, Azure Strike, Deep Breath, all up by 20% damage. Verdant Embrace, 20% healing. And Living Flame, 30% increased healing. Hero talents. Chrono Warden, Echoes cast from Resonating Sphere will no longer trigger or consume Golden Opportunity. Nice. Flame Shaper, Consume Flame no longer double dips healing and damage mods, and Gulf can now be stored in stasis. That's nice. Traveling Flame will now prefer injured allies when seeking a new target for Dream Breath. And Scale Commander, Melt Armor's damage is going up. Okay, so a couple of little buffs basically to the hero talents here. Og, Black Attunement nerfed in half to 2%. Instead of 4%. This will go a long way towards making Og less mandatory for keystones, although the tank nerfs go a long way towards making Og really good again, especially if we're moving to a world where, say, Brewmaster is good, which it kind of looks like we are. Nobody likes armor, likes blistering scales quite like Brewmasters do, so I suspect that Og is still better off of the tank changes than they will be worse off of the Black Attunement and Aspect Favor nerfs that we are seeing here. But these are still good nerfs. Black Attunement is incredibly OP, and it's been nerfed already, but it's one of those things where every step closer to removing it is a good step. Devastation, Eternity Surge, up. Pyre, up. Shattering Star, up. Unravel, up. Firestorm, up. Good. The spec was doing underwhelming damage on beta. Good to see that go up. Prez, Spirit Bloom healing up. Reversion will extend its duration by 30% when it's refreshed. Nice. Emerald Blossom and Echo Cast will no longer consume Essence Burst when they're released from stasis. Lifebind will now trigger its healing from heals that are considered procs. Nice. Field of Dreams procs will no longer incorrectly benefit from Titan's Gift. Okay. Yeah, these seem like really good changes to all 3 Evoker specs. Cool. Hunter, Sentinel. Symphonic Arsenal now has a 5-target cap. Sentinel has a 2-second period. Sentinel's damage increased by 100%, and Overwatch now has a 15-second ICD. Mage. Mass Barrier now has a cooldown of 3 minutes, was 2 minutes. Nice. That's a good thing to nerf. Glad to see that. Hero talents. Spellslinger. For just Arcane, Embedded Splinters damage reduced, Arcane Splinters damage reduced, Splinter Storms damage reduced, and Splintering Orb's Arcane Orb generates 2 splinters per hit was 4. Now, one problem with Arcane Spellslinger was it was already wrong for you to take your bottom node, and I think that this is going to make that more true, that you're just not supposed to talent your bottom node. So we'll see if they change that. Arcane, barrage damage reduced by 60%, damage per charge increased to 90%, so you're very much not supposed to hit barrage outside of with 4 charges. Missiles damage reduced and orb damage reduced as well. Okay, I mean, Arcane definitely needs to get nerfed off of the current or after the last week's beta build. I wonder if this is even enough to still make them not top damage. It's definitely enough to change the, you're really not supposed to press Barrage now except with 4 charges now, which is good. I mean, that should be the right way to play this back. Monk. Yu'lon's Grace, so these were tank changes that are just going to affect all Monk specs. Yu'lon's Grace and Healing Winds nerfs. Conduit of the Celestials, Celestial Conduit damage reduced by 8%, okay. Small little number change there. Master of Harmony, Manifestation Effectiveness nerfed in half. Balanced Stratagem effect reduced to 3 was 5. Wave 1,000 Strikes Vitality reduced to 30 was 50. And Brewmaster, Aspect of Harmony's damage contribution is reduced, and healing contribution also, both by about 25%. Brewmaster, Detox now costs less energy. Nice. This is really nice because energy is now a resource for Brewmaster that's a lot more kind of important than it used to be. Chi Wave damage reduced and Chi Burst damage reduced, and then a bunch of other changes, which for Brewmaster is actually the presence of these changes and this change, I think makes this net buff to Brewmaster where they're trying to nerf tanks, but I think in particular this means we're looking at maybe net buff here. Mistweaver, Ancient Teachings now transfers 170% of damage to healing. Tea of Morning now causes 12% of Enveloping Mist healing to transfer to allies with Renewing Mist, and increases Vivify healing by... So both of these are getting nerfed. Tear of Morning is getting nerfed. Ancient Teachings is getting buffed. Jade Bond is getting buffed. Yu'lon's Grace absorbs less, so this is just that same note that we have up here. Just apply, they've written it twice. Vivify healing increased by 30%, and Gust of Mist healing increased by 10%. Okay, I like the fact that all the spot healers are getting buffed for the healers. That's a really good change, particularly in a world where we're nuking tank survivability. I still don't think they should do that to the tanks, but I'm glad to see these changes at least. Windwalker. 8% nerfs to a bunch of abilities. And dual threat. So among them, yeah, okay. Yu'lon's Grace also getting nerfed here. Even more, it looks like, for Windwalker. And Detox costs less energy. Okay, so just some Windwalker nerfs here. Notably, this is not playstyle nerfs. This is just basically 8% kind of across the board. I'm sure there are some abilities that aren't in here, but most abilities getting an 8% nerf for Windwalker. These are the kind of things that, again, tuning is just so all over the place on beta that I don't really have a good idea of whether this is a spec that deserved this, deserved more, deserved less. No idea. Paladin, Lightforge Blessing now affects 2 additional allies, was 4. Flash of Light healing increased by 20%. Shield of the Righteous is nerfed. Dusk buff nerfed. Word of Glory buffed. Sanctified Plates no longer applies to armor for Shield of the Righteous. So these were all listed in the tank changes, but it looks like they're affecting the other specs as well. Plus the other tank changes. And then Ret Pally, Word of Glory healing increased by 20% as well. So it looks like this Word of Glory healing is just going to affect Holy and Ret as well, and then they're even further buffing it for Ret. Interesting. I'm not sure that I would say that Ret needs like more off healing, or that Prot needs more off healing. I kind of feel like just Prot needed more self healing from WoG, but that is what they're doing. Priest, Flash Shield buff, Powered Shield buff, Powered Life buff. Cool. Powered Shield buff is definitely going to be big for, this is just a lot of passive extra healing for the old disc. Hero Talents, Void Weaver, so the 2 that aren't holy. Disc actually is just getting these changes. Entropic Rift, Void Blast, and Entropic Rift and Void Blast are getting nerfed in terms of how much damage they're doing, but Void Heart is going to increase Atonement healing by more. So more healing, less damage for Void Weaver Disc Priest. Disc Priest, all healing is no longer reduced by 3%, so just a aura nerf reversion. Radiance healing increased by 10%, Penance healing increased by 20%, Holy heal increased by 20%, Serenity increased by 20%, and Divine Images healing light spell healing increased by 20%. So it looks like they're just buffing all healers except for Holy Paladin they're buffing all of the spot healing of all of these specs. It looks like most of what they're up to here. Rogue Recuperator, which is some self-healing, is now going to trigger 50% less often, every 3 seconds instead of every 2. Okay. Shaman. Healing Surge increased by 20%. Yep, there it is. So they're just buffing the spot healing of everybody except for Holy Paladins. Hero Talents. Farseer for Resto. Unleashed Life now calls an ancestor for 12 seconds was 6, so trying to buff Farseer Resto, which is good. Totemic Resto is definitely looking like the main version of this, so this seems like a good spec to buff. This was a fun hero talent tree already as well, so I'm glad to see that they're buffing it in this sort of way rather than changing how it works. Enhancement. Primordial Wave is now a 30-second CD, was 45. Doom Winds is 60 seconds, was 90. Okay, so we're doing enhancement changes. Cool. Casting Flame Shock, Frost Shock, and Sundering will now initiate combat with melee auto attacks. Okay. Molten Assault range increased. Molten Assault plays a visual impact, an impact visual on impacted targets. Crash Lightning range increased. Crash Lightning is now on personal resource display. Great. Earthen Weapon no longer on personal resource display. Elemental Blast now correctly replaces Lava Burst in Spellbook. Following talents are now 1 point. Molten Assault, improved Maelstrom Weapon, Witch Doctor's Ancestry. Great. I think this fixes the enhancement catastrophe that was underway before, where you would just not... You would go into this expansion and it's like, okay, you're losing your set bonus, and also you're gaining these hero talents that want you to take these points, and also you're not gaining extra talent points, so your tree is just going to feel worse. And it looks like, I think these is enough to make that no longer true. So this is really good changes for Enhance. Resto, Riptide, buff. Unleash Life, buff. Healing Wave, buff. Ascendance, nerf. Ancestral Guidance, nerf. Undulation can now be tracked through a counter on Healing Surge and Healing Wave spell icon. So buffing the spot healing and nerfing a little bit of the CD healing of Resto. Resto Shaman, I think structurally, is looking like a really, 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 really good choice going into War Within for raid healing at least. So I think that's still going to be true here, even if they move power out of its CDs into its spot heals. I think this is very likely to be a spec that we see in top guilds raid comps if the tuning is sort of close, because I think it's going to be a really good way to get the Shaman buff, and also you are providing Ancestral Vigor, which the other Shaman specs aren't, and you can provide it to a lot of people with Totemic. Warlock, Hellcaller. Hate Fury Rituals now increases the damage of Wither by less and reduces its duration by less. We're reducing the damage increase of Hate Fury Rituals, so it's a competitive choice against Bleak Heart tactics rather than the correct choice. Cool. Af, Wither periodic damage decreased by 20%. Soul Harvester. Your demonic soul now benefits from Mastery Master Demonologist and Shadow Touched. Soul Anathema is now affected by Mastery Potent Afflictions and Mastery Master Demonologist. Demonology Succulent Soul now increases the damage of Hand Gul'dan by 60%, was 20. So a lot of hero talent trees are getting this kind of once-over to make sure that Mastery is interacting with them, which is good. I like to see that. Destro, Shadowburn, 80% increased damage. Incinerate 5%, Soulfire 5%, Channel Demon Fire 10%, and Infernal 10%. We're increasing the throughput of Destro after reviewing the performance of Warlock specs from both internal and external data. In addition, we are considerably increasing the output of Shadowburn to bring it in line with other talent choices on the Destro tree. Yeah, I feel like Shadowburn was something you would talent and not even put on your bars just to get deeper into your tree with some builds. So that's probably a good idea. Warrior, just the tank changes mentioned in the tank video. So nothing there. One cool thing for PvP changes, we're not going to look at all of the actual spec changes for PvP, which there's a lot. So if you're a PvPer, a lot of stuff happening there. Mostly it looks like they're just kind of removing some aura buff things to stuff not doing damage or doing more or less damage in PvP. But the Stacking Deserter debuff no-show that's applied when leaving a solo shuffle or battleground blitz match is now applied account-wide. I think this is really good tech. I think that if you want to have a lever penalty, it should be applied on the account rather than on the character. So it actually is a penalty if you have multiple characters. So that seems good. And then rewards, fix an issue causing Unbound Changeling secondary stat buff to use incorrect scaling. Yep, get ready for Unbound Changeling coming back. That's going to be really good this coming season, as it is dropping from Mist to Tyrna Scythe. And raid rewards, Treacherous Transmitter's cooldown has been increased, and the primary stat buff has been increased as well. Going to a 90-second instead of 1 minute CD is probably bad for most specs. It's going to be good for a few specs that are on, say, 3-minute CDs or 90-second CDs, obviously, or kind of permanent uptime potentially, but probably makes it a little bit more awkward to use for a lot of specs, particularly if you're a 2-minute spec. Although if you're a 2-minute spec, you maybe already weren't interested, so yeah, interesting change there. That is it for our patch notes today. Let me know what you think of all of these changes and stuff. Again, check out my other video for my thoughts on the tank changes. Hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one. Bye.